Well, let's talk a little bit more about this Associated Press Newswire machine. There are all kinds of different levels of messages that roll on the machine. There's something called a flash, and a flash is of immediate interest to everyone. President Kennedy's assassination was a flash. The death of Presidents Nixon and Reagan and Ford, they weren't, because they were just deaths of a former president. Bulletin is something that is of immediate interest to nearly everyone. A plane crash, an earthquake, explosions. Stations and, well, particularly newspapers, will usually interrupt programming for a bulletin if that story impacts their area. Urgent, that's considered to be something that is usually important but not of interest to everyone. The firing of a Major League Baseball coach, the verdict of a major trial. And routine, you have routine stories all the time. These are the things that fill up the newswire 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as we watch this mechanical masterpiece doing this job. There's also something called advisories, and these are used to inform stations of upcoming events and administrative data. Sometimes you'll get corrections. There's a story that ran that has something that's incorrect in it. Other times you'll see something called embargoes. A politician may be giving a speech, and he or she may give the reporters advance copies of the speech so that they can start writing their stories with an embargo that basically says you cannot publicize this story until after the actual public performance. Well, let me pause this for a moment because I want to move over to a piece of copy that came off the UPI wire. And over here we see a story that's running on the UPI wire. Then we see the words bust, bust. Whenever you see the words bust, bust on the old teletype wire, that basically meant that a actual person is taking over the operation of the machine. This is being hand typed in. Then we see something that probably should have been bulletin but was misspelled, and it's talking about President Kennedy's assassination. Afterwards, it goes back to the story that was, most of the stories were on perforated paper tape that someone else had typed in and had been proofread. It goes back to that. Uh, then we see it kind of goes haywire. You see the words flash. And a flash is we mentioned, it's a news story that is of immediate interest to nearly everyone simultaneously. In a news career, you may see maybe one, maybe two, maybe three flashes your entire career. This is not something that you see on a weekly or even an annual basis. This is something that maybe happens once a decade. But we see the flash, then it says Kennedy seriously wounded. And again, we can tell that this is being hand typed all the way through. Um, those are the levels of priority for news stories that one sees on the teletype wire. I mentioned earlier that a flash is something that you see very rarely. And I want to close this particular video by looking at the announcement of President Kennedy's assassination from Walter Cronkite on CBS. Notice what he says when he gets the bulletin or the news copy is handed to him. He will use the word flash. To individuals who work in the news industry, that word carries a lot of baggage.
That our ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, was assaulted in Dallas, leaving a dinner meeting there. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.